Hare Krishna devotees, thank you so much for coming out tonight. On Thursday night, it can be many different places. A lot of you come for our Thursday night program anyway, but tonight is extra special. And for those that just happen to stop in, happen to come for darshan on Thursday night, today's your lucky day. You came on a very special day because we have a visiting sadhu with us, His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu. I want to share a few words on Mukunda Datta Prabhu. He is a disciple of His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He currently serves as a Sanskrit-English translator and editor for the BBT, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. He's a scholar in Sanskrit, Hindi, and other Indic languages, and he served on the Shastric Advisory Council, which advises the ISKCON's governing body commission. He has completed an English edition of the famous Sanskrit hymn known as the Govinda Damodar Strota from Srila Mangala Thakur. And his most recent work is in editing the Laghu Bhagavatamrita by His Grace Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu. He's also working on editing the Bhagavad Sundarbha of Srila Jiva Goswami and the Padyavali. He's also trained in classical Indian, North Indian style Kirtan. And so tonight's program we're going to do Kirtan for about 30 minutes. We'll see how the night takes us. And then after that we'll speak on Krishna Kirtan. So help me offer a nice Philadelphia gratitude to Mukunda Datta Prabhu, as well as his good wife, Mother Shri Murti Mataji, by loudly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Harinam Sankirtan Ki.
Namo Hare Hare Hari Hari Bol.
That was such sweet nectar. What do you think of that kirtan? One thing that I forgot to mention during my introduction is that His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu, he lives in Vrindavan, and he felt some of that Vrindavan special mercy during that kirtan. And these devotees, when they travel they come from holy places and then they go out, especially coming to the West, it's like they bring the holy Dham with them. And therefore, they're glorified in the scriptures as being more merciful than the holy places, because they're bringing the essence to all of us that are here, suffering day-to-day life, trying to gain some inspiration. That kirtan was really special. Thank you for chanting for our benefit and for the pleasure of Shri Radha Sharat Bihari, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, and Shri Gaur Nitai. So now, Mukunda Datta Prabhu is going to speak to us. And I want to request everybody who's on the floor to please slide in. He's come from a long way to see us, so we want to get as close to him as possible. And we can also move some chairs up closer too, just so those in the back, you can get a little closer.
Jai Radha Madhav Kunj Bihari. Jai Radha Madhav वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी
गोपी जन
वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी
गोपी जन
जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन रामनीर वनचारी जमुना तीर वनचारी जय जय राधा माधव गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदा नंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन 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 ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी you for giving me an opportunity to say a few words about Krishna consciousness. We're really very fortunate to have this translation of Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It's made all the difference to the world. Have you noticed? There are so many editions of Bhagavad Gita. Before I came to ISKCON, I read so many editions of Bhagavad Gita, but they didn't make sense because the persons who published them didn't understand them either, because they were not coming in Guru Parampara. But Srila Prabhupada, acting very selflessly according to the instructions of his gurus, decided to translate Bhagavad Gita as it is, Yatharup. And the result is that whereas these other editions of Bhagavad Gita never made anyone a devotee, Bhagavad Gita as it is has made hundreds and thousands of devotees in every continent. That's a pretty special attainment. And it's all because of Srila Prabhupada's decision to surrender to Krishna by surrendering to the order of his spiritual master. So we can read tonight from chapter 7, first verse, very important verse. In fact, it's one of the most often lectured verses by His Divine Grace in the entire Bhagavad Gita. But first, as always, we'll say Mangalacharana. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Udapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Madgavirapi Gopala Swikuryat Kripayayani Tadaiva Samphayaha Pitva Krishyayustat Priyajanaham. My dear Lord Gopal, only if you accept my words to be your cows will they produce enough sweet milk to give pleasure to your pure devotees. This is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur prays at the end of his 10th canto commentary. So we're following in his footsteps. Chapter 7, text number 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Saktamana Partha Yogam Yunjad Marashrayah Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yathagnyasasi Chatrino. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Let's repeat that. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said.
Now hear.
Now hear.
O son of Pritha.
O son of Pritha.
How by practicing yoga.
By practicing yoga.
In full consciousness of me.
In full consciousness of me.
With mind attached to me.
With mind attached to me.
You can know me.
You can know me.
In full.
In full.
Free from doubt.
Free from doubt.
Report by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Let's listen carefully. In this 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the nature of Krishna consciousness is fully described. Krishna is full in all opulences, and how he manifests such opulences is described herein. Also, 4 kinds of fortunate people who become attached to Krishna, and 4 kinds of unfortunate people who never take to Krishna are described in this chapter. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the living entity has been described as non-material spirit soul, capable of elevating himself to self-realization by different types of yogas. At the end of the 6th chapter, it has been clearly stated that the steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna, or in other words, Krishna consciousness, is the highest form of all yoga. By concentrating one's mind upon Krishna, one is able to know the absolute truth completely, but not otherwise. Impersonal Brahmajyoti, or localized Paramatma realization, is not perfect knowledge of the absolute truth, because it is partial. Full and scientific knowledge of Krishna, and everything is, Full and scientific knowledge is Krishna, and everything is revealed to the person in Krishna consciousness. In complete Krishna consciousness, one knows that Krishna is ultimate knowledge beyond any doubts. Different types of yoga are only stepping stones on the path of Krishna consciousness. One who takes directly to Krishna consciousness automatically knows about Brahmajyoti and Paramatma in full. By practice of Krishna consciousness yoga, one can know everything in full, namely the absolute truth, the living entities, the material nature, and their manifestations with paraphernalia. One should therefore begin yoga practice as directed in the last verse of the 6th chapter. Concentration of the mind upon Krishna, the Supreme, is made possible by prescribed devotional service in 9 different forms, of which Shravanam is the first and most important. Shravanam means hearing. The Lord therefore says to Arjuna, Tat Shrinu, or hear from me. No one can be a greater authority than Krishna, and therefore by hearing from him one receives the greatest opportunity to become perfectly Krishna conscious person. Shri Shri Radha Sharati Hari Ji ki jai, Shri Jagannath Balaram Subhadra Devi ki jai, Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Bhyam ki jai. One has therefore to learn from Krishna directly, or from a pure devotee of Krishna, and not from a non-devotee upstart puffed up with academic education. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the process of understanding Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, and the Absolute Truth is described in the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto as follows. In the interest of brevity, I'm going to skip the Sanskrit, but it begins with Shrinvatam Sukatha Krishna and goes on for 5 verses. Translation is, to hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of asamshayam, beginning of spiritual advancement is hearing. You have to hear. And how do we have to hear? I didn't read the Sanskrit, but for those of you who may know, he says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. You have to hear regularly. Bhagavata Seva means to serve the Bhagavata. But Bhagavata means two things. Bhagavata means this Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana, the superlative source of all things Krishna. It's called Srimad Bhagavatam. But another Bhagavata is that devotee who has completely imbibed that Bhagavatam and is a walking Bhagavata, you can say, walking, talking Bhagavata. Both of those are Bhagavata Seva. If you don't have a taste for hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Sridhar Swami says in his commentary on that passage, then you serve the devotee who does have a taste. And by serving that devotee, you can also gain your taste. You can also awaken your taste for Krishna. Now, once you awaken a taste for hearing about Krishna, then Krishna consciousness begins, and you advance very quickly. Once you have adopted the path of what we call sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi Bhakti also we call it, regulated devotional service by hearing in a disciplined manner every day, then we advance very quickly. And as it's described here, all the unwanted ugly things in our hearts, all the bad qualities, all the misconceptions, the bad habits, the lack of faith, the material desires, the envy, the illusions, everything, it is gradually cleared away. Krishna is also telling Arjuna, telling Uddhava in the 11th canto, ki Pungsam kalikritam doshan dravya deshatma sambhavan sarvan hardi chittastho bhagavan purushottama. That we're covered over by so many kinds of flaws in this Kali Yuga. Some of them we bring with us from our past life, and they manifest in this life because it's hard to clear that stuff out of your heart. Some of them are the result of our association in this life, bad environment that we may be in. And some of them are because we just don't really have the facility to find maybe good association or take advantage of it for whatever reasons. All of them are cleared away if we hear about Krishna sincerely, because the Lord within the heart becomes pleased. It's the same message that we got in in this section of the Bhagavatam, chapter 2 in the first canto. And it's quoted, Hridayantasto hi abhadrani vidhunoti. All the abhadras, abhadra means inauspicious things in our heart, they become cleansed away. Sarvan harati chittasto bhagavan purushottama. Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, He's within everyone's heart, and He cleans it out. Because He's pleased to see she's hearing after so many lifetimes. He's finally listening. He's taking interest. Let me reciprocate by making His path a little bit easier. It's personal. It's a reciprocation of love between ourselves and the Lord. Do you want to love Krishna? We have to know what we want. Sometimes it's a question well stated is a question half answered. So similarly, if you come before the deity and you know exactly what you want, and it's the right thing, why can't he give it to you? So we have to know, why are we here? Are we here to love Krishna, or are we here to take advantage of Krishna? If you're trying to take advantage of Krishna, then Krishna is a better cheater. Ask any Brajavasi. They have so much to say about this. That's why in Vrindavan we don't really take shelter of Krishna so much. We take shelter of Srimati Radharani more, because she's one of us. What does that mean? She's a devotee. She knows what Krishna is like, exactly what she knows. She knows what he's like. What is he like according to Radharani? Ashlishyava paravatam panashtamam adarshanat maramahatam karodua. You can embrace me sometimes, or you can make me broken-hearted by not becoming present before me. Yatha tatha va vidithatu lambardo. You can do anything and everything. I know this because after all, you're just a lambarda. Lambarda, she uses this word regarding Krishna. And none of her friends will discourage her from that. They'll all support her. Because the devotees, at least the devotees in Vrindavan, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, you can accurately say they're more devotees of Srimati Radharani than they are of Krishna. Because the way to please Krishna is what we're talking about here. Bhagavata Seva, Nityam Bhagavata. We may not have Srimati Radharani here in Philadelphia in our lives so much, at least when we leave the temple. Maybe we do, I don't know. But generally, we require some living, breathing, reciprocal person who's going to get on my case when I'm in Maya. And that's called the bona fide spiritual master. It's not his duty to flatter his disciple in order to get donations. And it's not his duty to, just say anything for popularity. Many of these so-called gurus do that. And Prabhupada wasn't in that caliber. Srila Prabhupada spoke exactly as it is. Isliye, isko kehte hain, Bhagavad Gita, as it is. So, और इस Bhagavad Gita में कोई विशेष शक्ति होगी कि so many hundreds and thousands of devotees have been created by his words, because he's real devotee. It's like when you come from Vrindavan on the national highway from Mathura to Delhi, going on the way to the airport. First you see Papu Dhaba. then after some time you see Asli Papu Dhaba. Then of course there's new Asli Papu Dhaba. Adi. So, the real thing is when a devotee hears instructions like this one. Yatha jnasasi tashrino. Agar asamshrayam samagram mam jnasasi. If you want to know about me, Krishna says, just hear. But hear every day. And hear from the right person. And hear seriously. Here's another thing about hearing. We don't have so much time. Until 8:15 I should go, or?
A little
More than that,
8:30
okay.
is good.
What else did Srila Prabhupada say about hearing? I can tell you. Sometimes you see that people are doing things in class, they're making garlands or something and doing so many things. Srila Prabhupada would not tolerate that. It's a fact. He did not like that. So he was very, very keen that you have to hear. In one lecture, in fact, he himself was attending a lecture when he was a householder, like most of us. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking. And someone next to him just leaned over and tapped him on the shoulder, just wanted to clarify, what did he just say? He didn't hear it. So Prabhupada was trying to summarize what his guru had just spoken. But his guru spotted this from a long distance away. And he pointed. And he said, would you like to come and give the lecture? He didn't tolerate. That's why he didn't tolerate. He saw it. His guru was very serious about people hearing. He was also very serious about people hearing. So, what is the proof that you've heard something? Who can say? If you've really heard something, what happens? You remember it? Okay. Anything else?
At first you will sense it.
Yeah?
At first you will sense it.
You'll sense it, okay. Anything else? Reflect on it. Shravana, manana, nididhyasana. What else?
You can tell as it is.
Tell someone else as it is, and
You can apply it.
okay.
You can apply it.
Ah, here we're getting warm. Prabhupada said in Los Angeles, hearing means acting. This is the austerity of knowledge. Have you ever heard this phrase? Jnana tapasa? A famous verse in Bhagavad Gita. Puta. One is purified by the austerity of knowledge. Ramanujacharya and everybody ever since. That's about 1,000 years of acharyas. All say the same thing about that verse. Which verse is that? 410 in Bhagavad Gita. Vitaraghavaya krodhamam mayamam apashita bhavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavam agataha. Many people in the past, Krishna says, have come to the stage of developing real bhava for me. Many, many, many. But you have to first be purified by the austerity of knowledge. So what makes knowledge austere? The first thing is, you have to acquire that knowledge. You have to hear. And that's why Krishna is saying here, Mayasakta manaha partha yogam yunjanman ashrayaha asamshrayam samagram nam yatha jnasasi tatrino. If you want to know me without any doubts, and you want to know me fully, in perfection, then take shelter of me by hearing. Just hear. Hear, hear, hear. Hear ye, hear ye. So, Prabhupada said hearing means acting. And what makes this hearing austere? First of all, you have to do it. That's a discipline, because we would rather, much rather read something else or hear something else than religious books. Prabhupada was astonished. First time in history, he said, I think that religious books are selling in such numbers as ISKCON is selling them. He was very impressed by that, because these books have potency, I've mentioned. So, you first have to gather this knowledge by hearing with some discipline every day and from the right source. Then what do you have to do? Hearing means acting. So the second austerity of knowledge, you have to actually act on what you hear. For example, if I'm telling you, hear this Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam every day, then you have a decision to make, don't you? Am I going to do it, or am I not going to do it? This is it. If the speaker says, please bring me a glass of water, and you speculate that, well, milk is actually better than water, so I'll bring him milk instead. That's also not hearing, really. Just follow the instruction. It's so simple. There's nothing esoteric, secret, mystical, hidden about Krishna consciousness. It's all right here in Bhagavad Gita, but nobody wants to do it, actually. Who's doing it? Very few. Krishna even himself gives us the statistics. What are they? One person out of many thousands even tries for spiritual life. And among many who have achieved some success in spiritual life, he says, hardly one knows me in fact. That's pretty slim, and it can be a little discouraging also. But there's really nothing at all to stop any one of us from becoming that one person, that 1 in a million. There's nothing really. The ball is in our court. If we hear this instruction, we have a choice. Will I wake up tomorrow morning and hear something about Krishna, or will I, read something else instead of Prabhupada's books? Nobody reads any books in 2025, except Facebook. And look where that takes you. So, second austerity of knowledge, you have to actually apply what you hear. And there are some unpleasant things here. You have to give up desires for sense gratification. You have to, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication. Oh, how impossible in the modern day and age, isn't it? People think. Not so. I'm doing this for 50 years, no problem. Not even a temptation. It's not like the devotees are struggling to control themselves whenever they drive past a KFC. No challenge at all. There's just no problem. But, a person who's covered over by the modes of passion and ignorance, he can't put his faith in this. Because he hasn't heard. So, take the trouble to hear something, follow what you hear. Chanakya Pandit even said, Shastra that is not put into practice, that's worse than poison. Why? Because you think you know something, but you don't know anything. So, Then the tertiary austerity of knowledge, what is that? You have heard something, you've amassed some understanding, at least hypothetical understanding, and you've also applied it in your life. You've tried to follow what you've heard. Thereby you've got some real, genuine realization. Now what you with that? Somebody
Speak it.
You have to share it. You have to share it with those who are less fortunate. Because look how people are suffering so much in this world. They're so suffering. And, this is the knowledge that can do something about that. Nunam pramatta kurate karma yad indriya pritaya apranoti. Bhagavatam tells us that people who are cemented into this bodily misconception of life, they practically have no choice but to just obey whatever the body tells them to do. I was in the airport and I saw this billboard was there. Obey your thirst. You see, this is what happens. We become tyrannized by our minds and our senses, and we do all kinds of things. Kurate karma. Sinful things even people do. We mentioned 4 of them already. Because of the bodily misconception of life. You get out of that bodily conception of life, you're free from all that trouble. Because there's a bill for everything, nothing free in this world. You can cheat now, you can get away with it for now. You're not going to get away with it in the long run. That is a fact. So, tertiary austerity of knowledge, once you've understood these things, you have to somehow try to cajole or convince or, flatter or whatever you have to do to encourage someone else to take up the same process. And that is really what pleases Krishna, even more than you hearing. If you are in a position to speak something from the platform of realization to someone else, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, nobody's more dear to me than such a person. Anyone who takes the trouble to help someone else who has not come so far. That is the fast track, express lane, you can say, to Krishna's mercy. But it all begins with hearing, and as I mentioned briefly in the beginning, this verse is therefore probably the most often spoken verse. I mean, Prabhupada lectured on this verse, as far as I know, more than any other Bhagavad Gita verse, because it's that important. Shravanam. So, sthane sthita shruti gatam tunuvam manobhi. The Bhagavatam also says that you don't necessarily have to shave your head, you don't have to take sannyas, you don't have to move into a Himalayan cave somewhere. You don't have to give everything up and just eat leaves and drink, air. That's not necessary. But you do have to hear. And you have to try to apply what you hear. And then someday share it as well. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ne kaha ki bharata bhumi te hoilo manushya janma jar janma sharthak kari koro parupakar. In Bengali language, I think you can understand. Means, the persons who were born in India especially, you have to understand you have a special advantage and you have to take advantage of that advantage by sharing it. It's expected. And not only why is it expected? Because you're ordered to do so. Janma shartha kari koroparupakar. Means make your own life perfect first, then help the rest of the world. Let's all please repeat after me. You can't give what you don't have. One more time. You can't give what you don't have. Let it sink in. Janma sarthak kari tabhi koro parupakar. First you have to assimilate Krishna consciousness by hearing, which is exactly why Krishna is giving this instruction to Arjuna. The mother-in-law teaches the daughter-in-law by teaching whom? Her daughter, her own daughter. Everybody has seen it. It's since time immemorial. So in the same way, Krishna is teaching us. Even though he looks like he's speaking to Arjun, but Arjun already knows these things. This whole thing is just a play. Only meant to give him an excuse to speak Bhagavad Gita so that we can hear these things. Because we're the ones who really need to hear these things. And if we do hear these things, we've been describing what happens. Hote hote sab kuch shuddha ho jaye, or nishtha bhakti ki prati hogi. You'll get firm bhakti, and when you have firm bhakti by hearing like this, once all the ugly things are eradicated for the most part from your heart, then by that firm bhakti, you will advance very fast in Krishna consciousness. I like to give this analogy because when I was in college, they taught us biology, and they warned us all about what happens when you introduce an alien species into an ecosystem in which they were not created to inhabit, right? What happens? There's no natural predators in that new ecosystem. So what does the introduced species do? Takes over everything. Just creates a total imbalance, makes a big mess of things, you see? So we have to be conscious of this, that if we're removing the anarthas from our hearts, then there's no longer any predators for bhakti. Our bhakti lata can grow nicely. Nobody's going to come and eat it. So there's one Braj Bhasha book, it's a commentary on Nabhadasji's Bhaktamal, actually. And Priyadas wrote a commentary. He was in the line of Radharaman Goswamis in Vrindavan. He wrote a commentary in 1712 called Bhakti Rasa Bodhini. And in that commentary, he describes the power of satsanga. What is that power? He gives an analogy. We may plant a little tree, and we want that tree to grow, but you have to put a fence around that tree, because what happens? Khaskar Vrindavan mein. Yeah, bandar, yeah, goats. Also, we had a neighbor from Delhi. They didn't know how Vrindavan is. It's a village. So they moved, they bought their new house, they built their new house, they're all happy. They planted a nice bed of genda flowers, put a little white picket fence around it, very cute, very nice. But they didn't know this is Vrindavan. So in the evening when the guy comes back with all the goats, you can imagine what happened. They quaffed the entire garden in less than 15 minutes. It was gone, everything. So this is the problem. Our bhakti has to be protected from these, what kind of goats? Our own anarthas. Our own ignorance, our own passion, our own, various kinds of, as we described, abhadras, inauspicious things that were within our hearts. We have to protect it because we're planting this bhakti lata, bhakti creeper within our own hearts. What is that fence that we protect our bhakti lata with? You can take a guess. Sadhu Sangha. This is the Satsanga ka prabhav, isko bolte hain, this section. So, you fence it in with the association of devotees, and you water it. What do you water it with? That part we probably know, we've heard. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Ityadi. These 9 processes that Prabhupada mentions in his purport. And then, hote, what happens? That little Bodha will grow into a massive banyan tree, so big that you can tie war elephants to that tree, and they're not going anywhere. That's the power of satsanga. So just put yourself into this association. And you will find that gradually you become purified, you make advancement, you become happy, you become free from sinful reactions. And you can go back to Godhead. Why not? Nobody's stopping us. Only we are stopping ourselves. Rather, our anarthas are stopping. The goats are stopping us. Or the monkeys, as it were. Yeah, you got all kinds of creatures in Vrindavan. But, yeah, so this is what Krishna says. Very simple instruction, but very, very, very profound. And so So important that Prabhupada used to speak on it more often than anything else. So by satsanga, we water our bhakti lata creepers, our little plants of bhakti. It becomes very powerful. Nishtha, that is nishtha bhakti, as we mentioned. And then we go back to Gita. There's nothing stopping us. Anybody have any questions about any of this that we've discussed? I think it's pretty straightforward. But we have a decision to make. What is the decision we have to make now that you've heard this? Raise your hand if you've heard this. Okay. All those who raised their hands, now you have to do something about this. And you know what you have to do about this. And it begins maybe tonight, if you've not read anything yet. Otherwise, tomorrow morning. Don't let a day pass. What does Bhagavad say? What is that verse? Anybody know? Ujjannastam chayannasao. I forget just now, but with every rising and setting of the sun, more opportunity to hear about the Lord and become freed from this samsara chakra is lost. Except for those of us who are taking advantage of our life while we can. While we can. While this human life lasts, those who take advantage of it and try to hear about Krishna, for them, the sun does not shorten their life by rising and setting. Everybody else, just another day lost. So with all the money in the world, you cannot buy back even one moment of time. Somebody said, devotee in New York actually, he shared with me one of these subhashitas. It says, there is no doubt that with each and every breath that you take, you can chant the name of Bhagavan, Hare Krishna. You can do that. It's possible. But that's guaranteed also. It is definitely guaranteed that you can do that if you have a tongue, that is. But it's not guaranteed that you have even one more breath. It's not guaranteed. So think about it. And you cannot buy a second of time back, so use it wisely while you can. All right. No questions? No comments? Yes, please.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Really appreciate this message that you delivered. I had one thing that happened to me a while back was I would always fall asleep during Srimad Bhagavatam class every day.
I know, I got a thyroid problem.
And Ravinda Shri Prabhu, he was the temple president here at the time, and he noticed that. And he chastised me about it and said, you need to sleep more, and you need to sleep one time. And I had this, well, I do this, I do that, I do that. He says, you need to sleep so you can hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And it was a really powerful message. Like, Srimad Bhagavatam is so important, you should consider it going.
Real simple. Yeah. This is satsanga ka prabhav. This is the value of the association. Sometimes things that we couldn't think of on our own. Somebody just mentions it and it hits you like a ton of bricks. Mirabai ne kaha, though we don't quote her so often, ki mere par nikas gaya sat guru marya tir. This is what it's like. When a sadhu says something that's powerful, it's like a javelin right through your heart. And sometimes it hurts also, because it's a guru's duty, at least with his own disciples. He can't be nice all the time. He has to do the needful. So, yeah. And, devotees, if you're not somebody's disciple, but still, they can help you. And we should be open to that as well. So Prabhuji is pointing out that the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually the purpose of our life here is only to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. There's nothing more beneficial than doing that. Because nothing else is going to help you get out of this mess that we were in. Nothing will do that. Everything else that we're doing and prioritizing will just entangle us further in this place in which birth, death, old age, disease, and threefold miseries are necessary. But Srimad Bhagavatam can take us out of that, if we so choose to hear. So this is your choice. Please take it up wisely. I'm not going to pressure you beyond that. But the message is very clear, and the message is from Bhagavan, not me. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Nothing else, otherwise we can stop now.
I'm just thinking, there's only a few devotees that are very eager to hear, like every day. And I've seen throughout the years, a lot of people, Bhagavad class or something, come back to, they just prepare to go and chat. And what the reason for that?
Yeah, you know, the thing is that we are habituated to animal life for so many hundreds and millions and trillions and gajillions of eons. We've already been through, say, 8,400,000 different species, and the residue from our existence within those various animal species, within our psychology, is imprinted very firmly. You can even say in some cases it seems to be case hardened. So it's not so easy thing to get rid of it. That's why I said it takes some time. You have to be patient. But gradually by hearing it will become worn away. Drops of water wear away the stone, and we have stone hearts. But this water that we are placing into our hearts every day by regular hearing, it wears it away. It does. I can honestly say that I don't have the same problems that I had before I began this process. That I can be honest. I may not be perfect yet, because it takes some time, but I definitely am not suffering like I used to. So people don't have the taste because we're associated with 90%. Look at your association. What are you doing in the day? 90% of the day you're investing in something non-devotional, something non-spiritual also. So what do you expect to get? That, of course, that's going to cultivate a different taste. It's going to cultivate a taste for, you know, CNN or whatever it is, wherever you put your attention. But if you get a taste for Bhagavatam, and I've already told you how, anybody remember? How do you get a taste of Bhagavatam according to Sridhar Swami? You serve sadhus who have that taste, sinless persons. If you serve them and gain that taste, and protect that taste by fencing it in with good association, as we mentioned, then you no longer have that problem. This is what life is for. Don't waste your time. It's a squandered opportunity, and it's such a loss. If a person comes 99% of the way through all these 8 million some odd species, finally comes to a human body, finally gets a bona fide spiritual master, finally takes up the process, even, and just because of some bad habit he loses that? What a shame it is. It's hard to imagine. You've already come 99% of the way, everybody sitting in this room. Otherwise you wouldn't be here tonight. You have some taste, but you have to really cultivate that. You have to focus. Dhyana. Dhyana means focus. Like a magnifying glass. The sun's rays are dissipated throughout the sky, but if you take those rays and pull them all together into a pinpoint through a magnifying glass and put it on a mountainside full of dry straw, you can burn down half the state of California. It happens every summer there. That's power of focus. So focus your attention on this hearing while you can. And, you know, other people, you're flying your own plane. You can't really worry too much about what mistakes they're making, but you should maybe observe and learn from their mistakes. Bhagavatam has examples of people who have become perfect. Bhagavatam also has examples of people who blew it. Both examples are there for us. That's why we're supposed to hear it. I hope that's helpful. Is it? Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, then. Yeah. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
I'd like to thank His Grace Mukundadatta Prabhu for coming and speaking to us tonight, as well as leading us in Kirtan. Very, very wonderful night for us here in Philadelphia. I know you'll be traveling to different temples, different locations. We hope to see you throughout the summer at some point again. I know you came last year, and hopefully you can make it part of your yearly stop to visit Shri Shri Radheshwar Bihari and all their devotees.
You're beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna devotees, there will be prasadam served in the prasadam room at this time. If you have or you want to ask or just introduce yourself or meet Mukunda Datta Prabhu, we'll be here for a few more minutes. Hare Krishna.
Yes.